Good afternoon, everyone. 4 o'clock straight up on a Thursday edition of On Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Hope everyone had a good sports Wednesday. And of course, you're enjoying the 4th of December, 2025. We got 2 hours to play with. Don't forget to get social with us as always. You can hashtag On Q. And of course, get connected with me on all social media platforms TikTok, Rich Q on a mic, and of course on X and IG at Rich Q on Q. And we always want to thank our wonderful sponsors. As always, keeping us locked in. Get ready with tea, Three Brooks Bourbon, fresh roasted coffee. A new episode of BYP is going to get dropped Manana with Lloyd Vance as we look at week 14 in the NFL and a lot of marquee matchups starting tonight, Thursday Night Football, must win for the Dallas Cowboys against I guess you can say, hit or miss Detroit Lions squad. And as always, two locations for our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemens Bridge Road, and the new location in Mount Laurel. And you can capture us as well on Sports Radio 1029 FM, the game. So we've got a lot of NFL to dive into. We will get into a little more hot stove baseball. We kind of carry over the conversation from yesterday. Got some really good feedback when we were talking Phils, Red Sox, Mets, Yankees, and we'll talk a little more about that around 4:45. But we haven't had them on in a while, which means we love savings on this show. And that's why we bring back our good friend, Nick Kosko, who is without a doubt, I would just have to tell you off the bat, the man of the people, one of the fan favorites of the show. I mean, I'm just telling you exactly how it is. One of the fan favorites of On Q, our guy, Nick Kosko, does a great job on 3 Sports covers college sports for On3 Sports, play-by-play, RU Wrestling, Drexel Wrestling, Cal Live Athletics. Also dabbled in a little MMA with MMA Pro League a couple weeks ago. And wondering if he has gotten any sleep now that he is a newly minted father. How are you, brother?
I'm good, Rich. It's been an absolute whirlwind over the last 3 weeks. Son is doing well. Wife is doing well. He's almost 4 weeks old at this point. So
Wow.
it is, it's kind of mind-boggling. He was born 8 pounds, 4 ounces on November 10th. So we're very excited. We are getting sleep one night and no sleep the next night. So that's just that's just unfortunately the way it goes. But it's all worth it. And now we're ready to ramp it back up on the writing scene and the broadcasting scene starting tomorrow. As you mentioned, Drexel Wrestling, doing their matches this year as well, in addition to my good old Scarlet Knights. So they'll wrestle Penn State tomorrow. Looking forward to that. But college wrestling's in full swing. But obviously, I know we have a lot of college football to dive into because as you said, haven't been on in a little while, so we have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, we do. And let's start with the obvious. So who looks worse? Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. I mean, the Lane Kiffin news when it dropped out, a lot of comments. You get the Rebels fans chiming in. You get the Tigers fans chiming in. Obviously, Spurns Ole Miss. He jumps to LSU. There's a lot of conflicting reports. Ultimately, right now, as the dust is starting to settle and clear, who looks worse?
Lane Kiffin looks worse. I don't think it's any question at this point. Now, is this similar to the Tennessee spurning for USC back in the day? Not necessarily, because again, Tennessee was throwing riots when he left after just one season. Now, albeit it was a 7-6 season, but it was like, oh, the Lane Kiffin effect. It's going to start to take shape. Tennessee's going to be back on the map in about 2 or 3 years, and they're going to be national powers year in and year out. And of course, he leaves for USC. Now, this time around, Rich, I'll be honest, I didn't actually think Lane Kiffin was actually going to leave Ole Miss, considering the landscape of college football these days with the transfer portal and NIL, and the fact that Ole Miss was giving him carte blanche. Hey, they're like, hey, we will give you whatever you want, whatever you need in order to win at the highest level here in the SEC at Ole Miss, right here in Oxford. This is why you don't have to go to LSU. You don't have to go to Alabama. You don't have to go to the Georgias, the Floridas, whatever the case may be. Name any big power school or traditional blue blood. You could do it here at Ole Miss because we are in the SEC. We are 11-1, and we're going to the playoff, right? And we get the national title pretty much this year, if anything. So I didn't think he was going to leave, but as it just progressed, you're like, oh, he is going to leave, because I didn't want to believe it at first, where it was like, we're going to make an announcement right after the Egg Bowl. I'm like, all right, maybe he is really this indecisive, because that's who he is. Like, he's going to draw this out because Lane is going to be Lane. But I ultimately thought he was going to stay because everything being equal, Rich, the money was equal in terms of contract, what each school was going to invest in terms of NIL dollars for a roster. It was all equal, but I equate Lane Kiffin to somebody who's just not that he's never satisfied, but he's always chasing. Like he's chasing for the next big thing. Maybe he thought he accomplished all he could accomplish at Ole Miss. Now, granted, he's going to say, "Well, they wanted me to coach." Players are saying the opposite now, and so is the AD Keith Carter. So he looks a little bit stupider at this point, in layman's terms.
Yep,
He's a chaser. At this point, we shouldn't be shocked. I'm not mad he left. I wish he would have stayed. Would have been good for college football. But him leaving for LSU is also good for college football. So, but in long story short, he does look worse off because he's the one who spurned them, not at midnight this time, but he spurned a playoff team to go to a team that could
agree.
fire him in 4 years if he doesn't win a national championship.
Yeah, and I know again the back and forth between the AD respectively and Kiffin and then the players coming out. I mean, look, if they sat there and said, "We want you to see this through," I mean, you're on the cusp, right? And then he
Right.
bolts. That is a bad look, and you've got former players that are coming out. But I thought you hit the nail right on the head. He's a guy that you to kind of draw the comp when you're growing up and you're playing with your friends. You're 7, 8, 9 years old, and your one buddy you get a new bike and then your buddy gets a newer bike the
Mhm.
next day. All of a sudden, you're like, I want his bike. Like you're
Yeah.
always looking for something better and never satisfied. To me, I think what really gets lost is now with the hypocrisy when we start to talk about the NCAA, the transfer portal, the NILs. You can allow coaches to do and jump all you want, but then players now. What about the kids that he went in their living room and he was pitching the parents
Mhm.
recruit these kids. I'm going to take care of them for the next 4 years. I mean, I don't know, man. He just strikes me as to be honest, a snake. And I don't I couldn't trust a guy like that.
I mean, you're not wrong in saying that, and I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's just a matter of he can get away with it, especially now because he is a really good coach. He's one of the best coaches in college football right now, based on his track record, especially at Ole Miss. He if you watch, I watched the ESPN documentary on him. It's like the many lives of Lane Kiffin or whatever it was called. I watched it. I've always kind of been a Lane Kiffin fan, especially after he quote unquote rehabilitated his coaching image and his off the field life as well. When he went to Alabama to coach under Nick Saban, he went to Florida Atlantic. He went to the far corner of Florida to resurrect an FAU program, and they played really well. So all of a sudden, he gets a big job, and you knew he was going to leave. Remember they signed like a 10-year extension or what
Mhm.
the heck it was, or it was on the
Correct.
table. But you knew he wasn't going to stay at Florida Atlantic for a decade. He's going to go to the next big job. And initially, Ole Miss looked like a stepping stone job in 2020 because it was the COVID era and NIL and the transfer portal was still in its infancy. So you were still thinking, all right, if he does well at Ole Miss, he's probably going to end up going to another big job. And it's no secret he almost took the Auburn job a couple of years ago. And I'll give Paul Feinbaum credit for this. He said if the Alabama job was open, Lane Kiffin would have turned the plane around and said, "I'm not signing the LSU contract. I'm going to Alabama because he wants the next best thing." So he's always been like this. So people who are surprised by it, I don't know what you've been looking at for the last 15, 20 years when it comes to Lane Kiffin. I wouldn't be surprised. I was a little surprised that in the day and age of the portal and the NIL that he wouldn't stay at Ole Miss at this point because everything's on an equal playing field, and he's been open and honest about his personal life and his physical health being the best it's ever been while in Oxford. His whole family, including his ex-wife, were living there, but now they're all moving to Baton Rouge. So I guess it's a moot point now at this point. So, if you look at what LSU is bringing in, if they win a national championship, more power to them.
Mm,
That's the goal if they can get a national championship. But don't be surprised if this LSU team, for whatever reason, and it's way too early to project. But if you
sure.
say this LSU team misses the college football playoff this year, and I'll tell you right now, if I'm going to project 2026, they will make the playoff next year based on who he's going to recruit and who he's going to bring into the transfer portal. Because he's the transfer portal king. But if they miss the playoff next year, Q, they're going to be gunning for his head after one season. That's
Of
how that
course.
school is. Ole Miss would have given him a lot more job security. So good luck LSU with Lane Kiffin. I think they are going to be really successful, winning a national title. I don't know, remains to be seen. But if they get at least one out of them, they'll say, you know what, the headaches were worth it. But if you win a national title, like the other coaches aside from Nick Saban, don't be surprised if he's fired down the line too.
Where the reports, I don't know if you guys reported on this as well or had some thoughts. Were these reports coming out that Florida State was in the mix for Lane Kiffin as well? They were trying to court him.
Yeah, we were hearing something along those lines. Nothing too crazy as far as I can understand. We reported on it. We kind of aggregated a little bit, so I don't think we directly reported that here at On3, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, heck, if Alabama actually, I know there were rumors that Kalen DeBoer's, was back channeling, seeing that, hey, maybe we can get out of Alabama and go to Penn State, which I always thought was complete nonsense anyway. But let's just say that happened. Would I have been shocked if Alabama would have been like, you know what, maybe we are going to give Lane Kiffin a shot now? Because realistically, if Lane Kiffin was going to take any job in the world, there is one job he wants besides LSU. It would be Alabama. And
Yep.
don't be shocked if for some reason Kalen DeBoer gets canned or he goes to the NFL, or whatever the case may be in 5 years, that Lane Kiffin's not thinking, maybe I can go to Alabama now and go win over there too. So the Florida State thing, if it did happen, they were looking to get him because obviously they've struggled under Mike Norvell the last couple of years since winning the ACC and getting snubbed by the playoff with their quarterback injury. Wouldn't have shocked me, but Florida State to me, if Florida itself was already a distant third between Ole Miss, LSU, and Florida, Florida State was in a different race when it came to the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes.
Couple of minutes past 4 o'clock hour on a Thursday edition of On Q. Rich Quinones here. Don't forget we're powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee, BYP 20% off your first purchase. Costco kind enough to join us as well. All right, championship weekend. Let's get down to it. I mean, obviously, you always get these great, wonderful marquee matchups, right? On paper, so to speak. SEC championship, Bama, Georgia, Bulldogs laying 2.5. And, I've looked at this game. You know how I feel about Georgia and that defense. We know about Alabama and their weapons. I kind of like where this line is at, to be quite honest with you. And to me, these types of games, especially when it comes down to powerhouses like this, you got an 11-1 squad in Georgia, you got a 10-2 team in Alabama. I look for in the trenches. Yeah, I was a little surprised that the total is a touch under 50. But what is your, I guess you can say, your key or keys to the game in this one for both of these squads, respectively?
Well, don't forget Alabama already beat Georgia this year, and it's kind of
Yep.
similar to if you go back a couple of years ago when I think Georgia was the favorite over Nick Saban's Alabama during his final season, and then they ended up beating them.
And that was a close game,
Right, it was a
24-21.
very close game, and Alabama stole it right there, and they stole that final college football playoff spot again. Same year as that when Florida State was snubbed at 13-0. Not that I think they should have made it without their starting quarterback, and I'm fine with the decision. But that's another point, obviously, and that's all in the past. But I'm not surprised Georgia's the favorite because they've been the hotter team, and Alabama seems to have an Oklahoma problem for some reason, and I think Oklahoma is a little bit too high in the rankings as well as another side note. And you know me, I've been a little bit more critical of Oklahoma this season, but they're going to get in. As far as this game is concerned, with playoff implications and the keys to the game, to me, Alabama, they've been struggling to run the football all season long. If they can have any semblance of a run game and really contain, and then use their defense to contain Gunnar Stockton, Georgia's quarterback, who's been pretty good as a dual threat quarterback, was in the Heisman conversation about halfway through the season. I think if Alabama plays a similar game to what they did earlier this year, against Georgia, is able to control the game a little bit, and Ty Simpson doesn't make mistakes, I think Alabama actually is going to win this game. That will really shake up the rankings, but it doesn't surprise me that Georgia's the favorite right now.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to get your thoughts. If you go by that last game, I mean, Simpson played relatively well. He was efficient, threw for close to 300 yards, a couple touchdowns. Uh, but Georgia was able to run the ball for over 200 yards. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm Georgia, I want to set the tone early and often. I want to try to get the ground game going. I want to limit the possessions from Alabama. I think their defense, though, the defensive front, I believe they're going to make some plays. Speaking of Georgia in this
Mhm.
game, I'm leaning towards Georgia and the points in this one.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, I want to go with Alabama because they are the dogs. I know it's in Atlanta, and
Yeah.
I know it's neutral site, but it's essentially a home
Yep.
for Georgia for the SEC title game. But you're right that back in that first game, I mentioned the Alabama running game. Jam Miller led them with 46 yards on the ground, not good enough. Ty Simpson played well, which was good. And then pretty much it was just a stalemate in the second half, other than like a lone Georgia touchdown or something along those lines. So Alabama did all their work early on in that game in the first half. So I think if they could jump out to a lead in this game, I think that'll bode well for them. As I think they're a little bit more equipped to play while they're probably about two scores ahead, where they're going to
Yep.
have control of this football game. But if this is a grinded out type of game where maybe Georgia's controlling the tempo a little bit, and it's a tie game at halftime, or Georgia's up, let's just say, I don't know, 17-13 at halftime, that I think Georgia's going to be in good shape. So Bama can control the football with any semblance of run game. They don't turn the ball over with Ty Simpson, and they limit Gunnar Stockton beating them with his arm and his legs. I think Bama will be in good shape. But I think either way, that line's about right. This is going to be a razor thin game in the SEC.
Yeah, potentially speaking of razor thin, you got Indiana, Ohio State battle of 1 and 2. Buckeyes, top ranked team. Indiana slips in number 2 right here. I mean, listen, you're talking about the Big Ten championship. We know long history, right? I don't think a lot of people were looking at Indiana. Obviously, Ohio State's a different animal. They're laying 4 in this one. The total is 47.5. And again, I hate to kind of like belabor the point, but to me, these games are won and lost in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I can see this game being a 28-20, 28-21, 28-24 Ohio State type of game and win.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Ohio State is going to win. That's nothing against Indiana because every fiber of my being wants to pick Indiana. I'm just like, at a certain point, you can't pick against Indiana in one of these big games. Something's going to happen, and they've proved it. They've proven it twice this year with the Oregon win on the road. And I know Penn State was down this year, but they did beat Penn State on the road as well. That's not an easy place to play, even if
No.
it's a 6-6 Penn State team that fired James Franklin. And again, it's not. This is not last year's Indiana team that went 11-1 and was kind of waxed by Ohio State, then obviously controlled by Notre Dame in the first round of the playoffs last year. This game's for the number 1 seed. Make no mistake about it, the loser of this game is not going to drop out of the top 4, by the way. So I would imagine both of these teams are going to are going to have a first round bye regardless of the result because their only loss is going to be against the other team in a conference championship game at this point. So um, Ohio State to me is favorite. I think they have the better defense. If I'm going with the quarterbacks right now, Julian Sain's been more efficient, but we saw last week. And now again, Ohio State got over the they got the monkey off Ryan Day's back. They beat Michigan. They broke that 4-game losing streak. But you saw early on in that game against Michigan last week on the road, Julian Sain, while he wasn't rattled, Ohio State was going to be in a big hole. Luckily, their defense and Michigan's offense is not what Indiana's offense is this year. But if that game's 14-0 rather than just 6-0, that might be an entirely different ball game. So I'm interested to see if Indiana can get in the face of Julian Sain, make him struggle a little bit early. Can Ohio State be that resilient team again? Because they haven't really been tested this year, other than that first game against Texas, where it was kind of a slobber knocker defensive fest, where the offense from either side really wasn't there. And then I would say they were tested this past week against Michigan, and then they kind of ran away with it in the second half. So I think Indiana's going to test them early. I think Ohio State ultimately will win this game because they have the better defense. But if Indiana gets going, man, I mean, I know they're not going to put up 56 like they do against Purdue and all other
Mm-hmm.
mid to lower tier teams in the Big Ten. But man, if Indiana gets going, that offense is so tough to stop. Mendoza is so good. Omar Cooper, their wide receiver who made that ridiculous catch against Penn State, he is so good as well. And Kurt Signetti, we know this, Rich. Google him. He wins.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly, and you brought up a really interesting point. I mean, think about it. Both these teams come in with ridiculously long winning streaks. Indiana's won its last 13 regular season. Ohio State 12 consecutive wins. Again, you get over Michigan regular season finale. You add in the postseason in a mix,
Yep.
and their title run. I mean, it's a great run of 16 straight. Now, the pressure. Think about it, right? The winner of the game, you mentioned they're going to be locked in number 1 overall,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a guaranteed first round bye.
Yep.
So I guess when I give you the barometer on pressure, how about a kid in Fernando Mendoza? Like if he goes out 20 of 28 for 265, 3 touchdowns, does that basically solidify him as does that lock him in when we're talking about Heisman?
When we're looking at the Heisman odds, I mean, I think Diego Pavia is the one who really, got on the, not that he wasn't on the map, but, we know about Diego Pavia, but he really made a statement last week. Now, the stats weren't gaudy, but he made some highlight reel plays. And of course, struck the post in the end zone in that win for Vandy over Tennessee. Mendoza's right there, man. I think it the advantage that Mendoza and Julian Sain have right now, and unfortunately, I think it's going to go to a quarterback this year, as it usually does. I think Jeremiah Love should really be in the running as well, the Notre Dame running back, because he's been so darn good. But the problem with all those, with the other two guys in Love and Pavia, are Sain and Mendoza have this extra game before the playoffs, and it's for a conference title and the number 1 seed in the college football playoffs. So they're going to have a lot on the line right here, and this is going to be considered a gigantic game where if they show up, big players show up in big games and big moments. I think the winner of this game, that quarterback is more likely to win the Heisman in the end anyway. Sain and Mendoza, I think Mendoza still has the touchdown lead across all of college football, so that does bode in his favor. But I think because Sain play, it's nothing against Indiana, but we do have there is brand bias in college football. Let's not forget that.
Of
I think
course.
Sain actually has the edge, and he does have the edge in the odds, by the way. But I think Sain has a slight edge right now because he's been more efficient when it comes to completion percentage. He plays for Ohio State, and they just beat Michigan, and that's the number one team in the country. So I think, but ultimately, I think if Mendoza and Indiana win, especially if Mendoza plays well, as you mentioned, maybe throws 2 or 3 touchdowns, 250 to 300 yards, doesn't turn the football over, and Indiana is crowned Big Ten champs to the number one seed, I think it is going to go to Mendoza. You'll probably see, guys like Mendoza, saying, and Pavia, and they'll probably throw Love a bone and get them to New York as well. But I think the winner of this game probably is the inside track to the Heisman Trophy in terms of the quarterbacks.
ACC championship. I mean, to me, not a lot of
Disaster.
juice.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry, but we got to bring it up for the ACC crowd. Virginia, Duke, obviously. Virginia doubled them up a couple weeks ago, 34-17. They ran roughshod. Morris had a monster game. Virginia's laying 4.5. I mean, this might be, if you have a little hot toddy, you stay awake, up until halftime.
Duke is very interesting because I know as far as the overall playoff conversation is concerned, they could really screw things up for the ACC because if Duke's the ACC champ, they might not even get in, and no ACC team will get in, and it just goes by their tiebreakers. And I forget what the exact tiebreaker is, but I know our guy, Chris Mad Dog Russo, probably made it very simple, which I don't know if it can be this simple, but it should be this simple. If you're going down the tiebreakers where there's no head-to-head, it's just who is the highest ranked team. That's who should be in the ACC championship game. So all credit to Virginia. They earned their spot, and so did Duke. But again, these wonky tiebreakers, and it is kind of weird seeing a 7-5 Duke team in there, instead of a 10-2 Miami team, which is actually in the top 12 when it comes to the college football playoff rankings and on that cusp of getting into the bracket. But I do like Virginia in this game. Now, would it shock me for typical ACC football that Duke wins this game and really throws the whole bracket for a loop? No, but if Duke does win this game, I think there's a really good shot. As long as James Madison wins, you're going to get Tulane and North Texas as the first G5 team. But I think the committee might actually rank James Madison, a second Group of 5 team, ahead of a Duke ACC champion team. And if that does happen, there's really no path for Miami to get in. And I think at that point, I mean, there might be one path in to get in, but it's going to be very dicey.
Why are they not ahead of Notre Dame? Why isn't Miami ahead of Notre Dame?
Listen, I know you love your Notre Dame Irish over there. I know
I can't friggin' stand Notre Dame. You know that.
I'm with you. Now, ACC title game aside, if Virginia wins, they're going to get in, right? They'll be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs. No big
Correct.
deal. Duke's going to screw things up if they win. The thing with Miami and Notre Dame is I've been on the Miami train all year when it comes to their head-to-head over Notre Dame. It doesn't make any sense to me as to why they're back. Now the issue is, and now I wouldn't rank them with the way they are right now. I hate.
But do you also look at their losses? Miami's losses, Louisville, SMU.
Right. The losses aren't. The Louisville loss doesn't look as good right now, and the SMU loss, not bad, but doesn't look as good as But the problem.
But Miami beat Notre Dame too.
Right. This is my overall point. When the committee for the college football playoff wants to tell us every Tuesday night, well, Miami's losses are not as good as Notre Dame's losses. Well, Notre Dame's one of their losses is to Miami.
Correct.
I don't know how this doesn't make any sense.
Open up the season.
I don't know how this doesn't click to people. And the problem is Hunter Yurchek, who the Arkansas AD, he's now the head chair of the CFP committee. He backed himself into a corner, and now it's a box that he really can't get out of now, and it's really screwed up the rankings, at least in my mind. He most recently, anyway, when it came to the head-to-head criteria, said, well, we really only want to use the head-to-head if they're the same record and they're back-to-back in the rankings. And guess where they got it? Guess what their get-out-of-jail-free card is? Notre Dame's 10 and Miami's number 12. Who's in between them? BYU. So that's why Miami's not jumping. Now, to get Miami into the playoff, which I think this has a possibility of happening, because they also, the committee, if they believe in screwing themselves, they also did this. They also left the door open that because even though Miami and Notre Dame are idle this week, again, no conference championship game for the independent Notre Dame, and Miami's not in the ACC title game, he left the door open saying, well, idle teams might shift next week depending upon other results. So what does that mean? If BYU loses to Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game, that'll be the second loss for BYU.
Which they already lost to them.
Right. That's two. Now, granted, BYU to me is probably more of a playoff team than Miami and Notre Dame right now. Although I do think they're both they're all worthy. But
who did they beat though, Nick? Who did they beat? They beat Portland State. They beat West Virginia, Arizona.
Maybe a Kalani Sitake guy, and he spurned Penn State to stay at BYU because of crumble cookies. So, but if you have BYU lose Texas Tech, right? Yeah, I think BYU, by the way, is not actually in right now. People forget that in their arguments. they're not in the bracket right now. They're on the outside looking in. They're one of the first 4 out. If they lose to Texas Tech, that'll be their second loss. Now, granted, they've only lost to one team, and it's the number 4 team in the country right now. Again, Texas Tech will get a bye, but I think the committee will be inclined to say, hey, can we move BYU down one spot because they lost again, while Miami and Notre Dame were just sitting pretty, not doing anything this weekend. If that happens, I could see a scenario where the committee's like, okay, let's move BYU below Miami, and now Miami and Notre Dame are neck and neck in the rankings. And at that point, the committee's either going to say, we don't care about head-to-head, we care about the we're going to use the eye test and other
Sure.
data besides the actual results in the field between these two teams, and we're going to keep Notre Dame in. Or they can use common sense, which, I mean, I can't hold my breath. They can use common sense and say, well, if Miami and Notre Dame are 10 and 11, it's time to move Miami above Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think it's almost like, trying to figure it out, like reading Braille. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but it just makes, if you're closing your eyes and you're trying to understand, it just doesn't make sense. There's no real rhythm or rhyme. I mean, your points are valid, but as you alluded, you're throwing in, BYU, and then now we're starting to talk about who had the better win / the better losses.
Right.
But I'm also looking at overall stature, right? I mean, Miami, Notre Dame, and then BYU. Like, I'm just not feeling it, if that makes sense.
No, I feel that, and I think that the whole wrench in this rankings right now, you got to look at number 8 and number 9 right now, Oklahoma and Alabama. Now, I think Alabama's a top 10 team. I don't think Oklahoma's a top 10 team, and then maybe I'm just staying on that train all year because I told you this year I can't buy in Oklahoma, and sure enough,
SEC conference.
Yeah, and sure enough, they end up winning 10 games this year. But I think the committee overvalued their win against Alabama. Not that they overvalued the win. It's a good win, okay? Oklahoma beats Alabama. I think Alabama's really good. But I think because they beat Alabama, the committee's like, oh, well, this team must be really good. But let's not forget, Q. Oklahoma already lost to Ole Miss. Again, playoff team, good loss. But they also lost to Texas.
Yeah, but to your point, they also beat 4 top 10 teams. Did they not? Or top 20 teams, right? They beat Michigan, they beat Auburn, they lost to Ole Miss, as you alluded to. They beat Tennessee, they beat Alabama, and they beat Missouri.
I think it's going to depend upon when you say they were ranked. Like if they were ranked,
I understand what you're saying.
Right. If they were ranked at the time, and then
yeah,
but
so
now,
fluid.
But
Yep.
now if you look at that Auburn win, is that really a good win? Is a 24-17 win over Auburn that good now? You know what I mean? But we could play this game all day because people are going to make the argument that Miami's win over Notre Dame in August wasn't that good because it was August. You know what I mean?
Auburn's 5-7 now. So your point.
Right. I mean, you could play the what if game all day and say like, well, that was a good win then, but it's not a good win now, or no, it was always a good win. Like you know what I mean. So like, it just depends upon how you value it. I think there is a factor though when you look at Oklahoma right now. They're the way they've been playing on offense the last couple of weeks, especially. LSU, they only score 17. Missouri, they only score 17. And luckily, their defense is playing lights out right now, because otherwise, they might have lost those 2 games. And again, they just got by Alabama. And, I'm not going to play the what-if game like the woulda, coulda, shoulda, like how the committee kind of does it. But I just don't value Oklahoma's strength as much. And I think because they're at number 8, that kind of throws a wrench into the teams that maybe should be in there higher, like maybe a Vanderbilt should be higher, just based on the way they're playing right now. It just depends upon what metric you want to use. Because if you're talking about the hot teams right now, Texas is really hot, but the problem is they're 9-3.
Right,
they have 3 losses, and everyone wants to say, well, they if they didn't play Ohio State, they'd be 10-2. Sure, but guess what? You still lost to 4-8 Florida.
Lastly, before I let you go, I know the head coaching vacancy, Penn State. So many different names are being floated around. Let's just say, play the dicey game that I like to play, right? Taking you kind of down the rabbit hole. Let's just, for argument's sake,
AC's our backyard. I see
Duke,
where we're going.
Duke beats Virginia. Does that give more clout to Manny Diaz? Because I know that's kind of the name that's being targeted right now or floating around for Penn State.
I'll tell you what, that's not a bad idea, and I really haven't heard Manny Diaz's name in a while when it comes to Penn State. I feel like he was an early name, right? It's like, all right, Penn State fires James Franklin. Who are the early candidates? Matt Rule, then name like 3 other big coaches, Manny Diaz.
Well, you got to cross some of these guys off.
Right, yeah. At this point, they've crossed everybody off. And it just seems like, and by the way, it seems like a lot of players are coming out in public on social media saying, you better hire Terry Smith or we're going to be pissed. at this point. Terry Smith has galvanized that football team right now. If he's not the permanent head coach, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of a transfer portal exodus. And I'm glad Kalen DeBoer, by the way, squashed the Penn State rumors. That was just total nonsense. As I
Yeah, but
mentioned.
with Penn State, like Michigan, like Bama, like Georgia, like all the monsters, it's all about the alumni and the boosters. They're the ones that are pulling the strings,
Right.
and they're the ones that are really making the decisions because they're
But I,
cutting the
I
checks.
think they're finding out right now. And I don't know if it's the boosters' fault or it's Pat Kraft's fault. And Pat Kraft's a good athletic director. Don't get me wrong. I'm you know me. I'm a college wrestling guy.
Yep,
He loves college wrestling, right? And like that's the best college wrestling team in the history of the sport right there. So I think he's done a great job as AD, right? The basketball team has turned around in some spots, depending upon how you look at it. Wrestling's great. They have a great hockey team. They got they got the number one overall pick, playing hockey for Penn State. And their football team's been great under James Franklin, just couldn't win the big one. But I don't know what the issue is because everybody they seem to target ends up getting an extension by these other schools. I think there's more money to be had. There's more donors for these other respective schools.
and they don't want to lose them.
Right, and they're coming out the woodwork. Again, look at BYU. They were about to get Kalani Sitake, and apparently
Yeah.
there might have been a handshake agreement between Sitake and Pat Kraft to come over to Penn State, and BYU gets a lot of money from Crumble Cookie CEO. What's his name? His name escapes me off the top of my head, but it's like, hey, us at Crumble Cookie, we're going to foot the bill for your new contract extension, and you're going to coach the Big 12 championship and try to win something here for BYU. So I don't know where they go. Manny Diaz actually does intrigue me, especially if Duke wins the national championship. If Duke wins the ACC title, they're not going to get into the playoff. At least in my mind, I think they will put a second G5. As long as James Madison wins, there will be two group of 5 teams in this year. But if Duke does make the playoff, Penn State's probably going to be like, you know what? We're just going to hire Terry Smith. But Manny Diaz does intrigue me because for what he has to deal with at Duke, a basketball school, and for some reason, that school, for as big of a brand it is, it's a basketball brand.
Of course.
Great job with the football team, right? And again, using the wrestling example, Duke wrestling is almost non-existent in the ACC, and it's only a 7-team conference in the ACC, and they're at the bottom rung in the ACC, which is kind of mind-boggling with the amount of money that school has. So, Manny Diaz, does he want to go back to Penn State? I really have no idea. Was he good at Penn State as the defensive coordinator? Sure, he was. Should Penn State make the call at this point? Why not? You could do worse.
2 more, and I know we're tight. Belichick. I mean, again,
You're at a loss for words.
it's a disaster. I mean, it was a disaster. It was always a disaster. You and I went back and forth. I told you when he never really quote signed the contract, that was a major red flag, and that was Carolina's opportunity to get out.
Yeah.
They didn't. I know it's December 4th. Is he on that sideline to start next season?
Right now, I'm going to say yes because based on signing day and some of the recruits that are already coming, like hey, like we flipped here, we signed here because of Bill Belichick. So I'm inclined to believe he's going to be around for at least one more season. Now, am I going to say and play the what if game on? Hey, they improved late in the year. Yeah, they were a better football team. It was still a 4-8 football team. Let's not forget this team was an inch away from beating Virginia, which is playing for the ACC title in overtime in Chapel Hill, right? So like if they win that game and they go 5-7, or does it galvanize them to get that 6th win? Maybe it does. I really have no idea because they missed their chance against Duke and then they absolutely got their doors blown off by NC State. So it seemed like they were turning the corner in the second half of the season, but then you get results like you had against NC State. They really weren't in the game against Wake Forest, so you were just like, what is going on here? Because they blow one to Cal on the road. They just missed out on the upset over Virginia, but then it's like, oh, they beat up on Syracuse. They're not low tier. They beat up on Stanford. So they're not low tier. It's all right, 2 wins in a row. Can they beat Wake Forest? No. Can they beat Duke? Oh, just missed out. NC State, blown out. So it's like, what direction are they going in? Now, could they be better next year? Sure. If you have an actual roster to field, if you get good recruits, maybe a couple transfers, sure. But you might see, based on, I was thinking they were going to turn the corner, whether that led to 6 wins or not, whatever. But to me, you're going to see probably more of the same next year. Maybe they'll be maybe they'll be improved, Rich, but are they going to win 7-8 games? I don't think so. I think right now, I think it's safe to say this is still a 4 to 6 win team next year. Could they be improved and still go 4-8 next year? Yeah, I could see it. You could be like, all right, that's a much better football team, but guess what? They're still 4-8. And I don't know what the future holds for Belichick after 2026, but I do think he is back for at least one more season in Chapel Hill.
And then lastly, about a minute to go, your guy, Deion Sanders, new freshman recruiting class, not very good when we're talking about the rankings from a Big 12 standpoint. My bigger concern is that the athletic department is projecting about 27 million deficit during the current fiscal year. So now you're talking they need about 12 million in institutional support from the university, 2.2 from student fees. These budgets were obtained from USA Today. At the end of the day, they can possibly be in need of about $41 million. And that's one of the reasons that Coach Prime is under fire there, because you're talking about a 27 million deficit after the pay raise and NIL payment. So is the rose off the bloom?
I think a little bit, because they were awful this year, and it really stinks to say that, because there were a couple games where you're like, my goodness, if they just don't make one or two mistakes, they win, and they you know, let me ask you real quick, what looks better to you? It's 3-9, no good, right? If they were 5-7 this year with, like, again, almost a completely different roster without the
Yeah,
stars,
you can.
yeah, you'd be like, okay, we could build for 2026.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he's going to attack the portal, because he does that more often than the high school recruits. I know he likes the high school kids, but they had the 75th recruiting class, or 75th ranked recruiting class in the country this year for 2026 after National Signing Day. 3 4-stars, 8 3-stars, no 5-stars.
Yeah.
50th overall in the country. I mean, no offense to my alma mater, but I think Rutgers had a better recruiting class this year. They did. They were actually at 44, believe it or not. So,
yeah. How many of those were from the state of Jersey?
1 4-star and 23 stars. So it just goes to show. I'm sure most of them are from Jersey. In any event, but I think Deion said the right thing, though, which was, why do these kids leave? It's not because of, they hate the vast majority anyway, not because they hate the coach, they hate the scheme, they hate their teammates, they hate the school. It's money. Colorado, and frankly, Colorado does not have money. They poured all their resources in, at least as far as I could tell, to those last 2 seasons with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and Shiloh Sanders and a couple other guys, and they kind of collapsed in 2023, and they peaked last year and missed out on a couple games where they missed out on the big. If they win, I think it was if they won one extra game or something along those lines, they would have played for a Big 12 title last year. So is that the peak of Deion at Colorado? Maybe it's going to be. Are they going to be this bad next year? I don't think so, because they do get, they did save a year of their quarterback in Julian Lewis. They are going to redshirt him because, he only played 4 games. So they have the quarterback. Can they surround him with talent? And he already promised he's going to shake up that staff. So I'm interested to see, again, with the deficit, how much can they pour into it to new staff members? You know what I mean? So, but if they can, finagle the checkbook a little bit there, Rich, I think they're going to be better off with a better staff under him next year. But I don't know what it's very, even in a wild Big 12.
Yeah,
you can't expect more than 6 wins next year to try to get back to a bowl game.
Hey, my bigger concern is this: if you're sitting on some checks that you haven't cashed yet, I would, as soon as this spot is over, you might want to get to TD. You might want to drop those.
I better put them in my savings account before day's end.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, it's okay if the bank closes at 5. You can still scan them in there, right? So don't worry.
That's what we got a cell phone for, right? A little mobile deposit here in the bank.
Yeah, Costco's sweating, getting a little worried right now.
I know. I already cashed all my Rutgers checks.
Listen, the kids got to eat.
Right? Good thing the Drexel checks are coming in now.
Yeah, baby food and diapers, man. They cost a lot. All right, you got anything cooking broadcast wise this weekend?
Yeah, so Drexel, Penn State for wrestling. Number 1 Penn State coming to Drexel tomorrow night, 7:30. You can catch that on Flow Wrestling at 7:30. Sold out crowd at the DAC over in Drexel. So that'll be a nice little debut for me on the mic over there in Philadelphia. I resume Rutgers wrestling next weekend on Sunday, ironically, against Drexel. They'll come to Jersey Mike's Arena on Big Ten Plus. And just check out Cable Atlantic Live. I'm dropping a bunch of Cal one-on-one podcasts right now for high school wrestling previews, high school basketball previews. So we're going to get into that as soon as the holidays are over as well, in terms of live games as well. And I will tease, I got a relatively big wrestling guest coming on Monday on On3 Wrestling, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
All right, real quick, Mark in Wallingford chimes in. He's a big wrestling fan. He says, Q, in your words, it's good to have Kosko back. Yeah. There you have it. So,
that's right.
All right, brother. Excellent insight as always. Give Nick a follow on social media. We always appreciate the time, brother. We'll do it again next week. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you, Rich. Thanks, man.
All right, you got it. My guy, Nick Kosko, he is a busy. This is what happens, right? You get those little squirrels that are collecting the nuts for the wintertime. You storm away. He's busy as they come. That's my guy. Extremely proud of him. Great insight. Got a lot of comments coming in on college football. We'll dive into that. Want to remind everyone we are brought to you by our good friends over at Three Brooks Bourbon. Get ready with tea, fresh roasted coffee, 20% off your first purchase, BYP20. And of course, our newest sponsor, Monmouth Park Charity Fund. Quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side. We'll reset the table on a Thursday edition of On Q. All right, welcome back, everyone. 37 past 4 o'clock hour, Thursday edition of On Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We're powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. As always, get social with me too on X and IG at Rich Q on Q. We are live on the YouTube channel at Rich Quinones. Like, comment, and subscribe. We got a couple shorts that we banged out. TikTok, Rich Q on a mic, all over the place. On, I guess, did we dub it the Thawed Out Thursday edition? We had the Woosah Wednesday. We get the What the Frig Friday. Maybe we're going to thaw out on Thursday because the weather up and down the East Coast, particularly in the Philly, New York, Jersey, the DMV, it is friggin' it's cold, man. I mean, I get it. It's football weather. It's hot toddy weather. But for all our good friends down there listening in Florida, enjoy it. I think Angel was telling me the weather the other day was 80 something odd degrees. A little jealous, a little jealous. By the way, had a couple guys ask me. They chimed in my thoughts on the new hire with USF, South Florida, the Heartline hire, which I like. You're talking about the seventh coach now in that university's history. You're going with a guy that comes from the background, the pedigree, played in the NFL, obviously was a standout player, part of that Ohio State staff. So I like that move. But again, it is all about recruiting in college football. That's it. It's all about recruiting. It's just these teams, like I mentioned, Deion Sanders in the recruiting class. Right now, it ranks last in Big 12. So you make of that what you want, but ultimately they're going to need some money. So you got a small freshman class, and maybe that's part of his plan, right? Because ultimately you want to bring in your guys, young, hungry. Now, is that the right game plan strategy for a team that finished 3-9? Are you looking to develop high school players, get them to stick around for a couple years? Is it sensible? Is it logical? That's yet to be seen. But the bottom line too is also, the football signing period, college football signing period started December 3rd. And I think what happens too is you get players, going to transfer portal, and it's basically like we're trying to build through free agency. So we have spots that need to be plugged in. Then we're going to go after player X, Y, and Z. And for some universities, they can't keep up with that. I mean, you're always trying to build a new team, and it's tough, man, because I got to operate on the surface. And then what happens is because guys are fluctuating in and out when it comes to the portal, there's no stability. There's no consistency. So it's hard for me to really win a win consistently with different teams, within that same program. So, all right, Thursday Night Football, Week 14 kicks off this evening. This is a great Thursday night game. We always complain about Thursday Night Football being bad and having some dog games out there. You got the Lions at home. They're laying 3.5 against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys, this is, again, desperation time, must win for the Dallas Cowboys if they want to keep their slim playoff hopes alive. And this is a big win for the Lions, or a big opportunity, I should say, for the Lions, especially in a stacked NFC North. Now, in our backyard, the big news coming down with the Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Carter will be out for Monday night's contest against the Chargers. So he had a procedure on his shoulders. That's a tricky spot right now. It's treatment on both shoulders, considered week to week. And listen, they know they're going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to win the NFC East. You want to save him as much as possible for the playoff run. Now, same can't be said for what's going on with their offense, but we'll get into them in a couple of moments. So, big game, big opportunity tonight for the Dallas Cowboys. Thursday night football against the Detroit Lions. And I think, you look at this game on paper, Dallas Cowboys can score. They can put up a lot of points. You're playing in a stadium that's pretty fast track, is it not? The Lions can put up some points. The line, the total is sitting at 55. It's juiced to the over 56 with some books, even 56 and a half I saw. Here's a spot now if you're the Dallas Cowboys where I don't think a lot of people expected the Cowboys to beat the Eagles, even though they were at home at the time. And I didn't really believe a lot of people felt or suspected that the Cowboys were going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And they had two very impressive wins. Also, they blew out the Raiders, so they sit in the midst of a 3-game winning streak. Now, the Cowboys have tonight's contest, the Vikings, the Chargers, the Commanders, the Giants. They should, if they get through the Lions tonight, the Vikings is a winnable game. The Commanders and the Giants are winnable games. That's 4 more wins. That gets them to 10, 5, and 1. Maybe they trip up against the Chargers, 10, 6, and 1. 10 should get them in the playoffs. I think 11 locks them in. 11 pretty much solidifies a playoff spot for the Dallas Cowboys. And what it's really going to come down to tonight, I believe, is the aggressive nature of Dan Campbell. Because he has shown you when everything works and we're going for it on 4th and 2, 4th and 3, 4th and 4, we're making these what others would deem tough analytical decisions. And Campbell's like, nah, 4th and 6 from our 35, got to have it. You got to look at, situational football. And you have to kind of read between the lines here. These 4th down tries have not really been as successful for the Detroit Lions in years past. That's just the bottom line. And if you're a Lions fan tonight, this is a huge game. This is a big game because the Lions, they kind of want to, quiet everyone down, calm them down, just let's see if we can weather the storm a little. That's a bad loss they had against the Green Bay Packers. They should have beat the Green Bay Packers. And again, they failed in big spots when you're talking about the 4th down or the lack thereof conversions. I look tonight. I think Jared Goff's going to have some opportunity to throw against the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if they're going to be able to run it against the Dallas Cowboys. They were able to run it for about $1.19 against the Green Bay Packers. And then Dallas, conversely, they should be able to sling it against the Detroit Lions. And that's the one thing you're looking at. If you go back to the Lions' last game, Jordan Love's not playing at the level that Dak Prescott is. And Jordan Love sat in the pocket. He wasn't even touched. Jordan Love throws for 234. 18 of his completions, 4 of those were touchdowns. They were able to kind of pick apart that Detroit secondary. So to me, that's going to be one of the keys of tonight's contest. Can the Dallas Cowboys not only sustain drives, but forget about field goals? You got to get 7-7-7. You want to limit Detroit possessions. And the other thing is, if you're in the Lions, you can ill afford to fall behind in this game. Because that's when Dan Campbell starts to panic even more. And then he's like, I got to go for, on 4th down every single solitary time. It's almost ad nauseum. So big game to start things off week 14 in the NFL. I mentioned the Eagles will bookend the weekend in the NFL with that Monday night affair. The Giants, thank God, cannot lose this week, and they have a bye. The 49ers, the Panthers, the Patriots all have byes this weekend. but you have a couple really good games at the point of the season, 4 or 5 games, and it's going to shift the tide. It'll shift the momentum and the complexion of the season, even though we're late in the season in week 14. Cincinnati, Buffalo. That is a big game for the Buffalo Bills. They're trying to keep pace with New England in the AFC East. Colts and Jacksonville, AFC South implications. Steelers and the Ravens, AFC North implications. Chicago and the Green Bay Packers, NFC North implications. The Texans and the Chiefs. Here you go. For the Chiefs fans, the Chief faithful that has been getting on me for the last, I don't know, 3-4 months, when I basically said this team was not going to make the playoffs, this team was not going to win the AFC West, this team was not getting back to the Super Bowl, the run's over. Here's a spot. I mean, this is pretty much it right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. There's absolutely Kansas City today, 6-6. They have zero wiggle room. They lose this game, for all intents and purposes, they're done. Their season's done. They're not making the playoffs. This is Kansas City has to treat this game like it is a playoff game, and they're laying 3.5 against the Texans. Now, I'll say this. I'm more impressed with the Texans defense than the Dallas defense, and the Cowboys beat Kansas City. And right now on a Thursday, I love the Texans on the road in this spot. Their defense is one of the best in football. Absolutely one of the best in football. Let me get some of these comments as well. You guys can always chime in. You can hashtag OnQ, and you can certainly connect with me on X. What do we got here? Q, path to victory for the Chiefs. Pierce. First team reps, 25 carries, 25 targets. Make sure he touches the rock. All right. We got some giant thoughts in there. I'll get to you guys in a couple moments. What do we got here? SR Chief 6 times in and says, Chris Jones, Q, it's his moment. He can take this team and put them on his back defensively. I'm not seeing it. I just think it is a down year. I think it's a down year. And as I mentioned, it happens in sports, especially when you have great runs. And what do? You fire back off. Sleeper Chiefs comes in. Q always enjoying the NFL content. Mahomesian's numbers against the Texans, close to 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns, 113 passer rating, Q. I think he's poised for a big-time game. Listen, it's not like he played poorly against the Dallas Cowboys. But this is a different defense. Now, this is where you might lean towards Kansas City in this spot. They're at home. And you have to treat this game like a playoff game. You really do. You don't need to see Andy Reid get a little conservative. You don't. Stick what works for you during those games that you won. Now, I can't come in on the air on Monday and we're talking about Patrick Mahomes being the leading rusher for Kansas City. That cannot happen. It just can't. That cannot happen. If Patrick Mahomes is the leading rusher for Kansas City Sunday, they're not winning this football game. They need to be able to grind it out. And the one thing about the Texans, they are very, they don't give up a lot. Can Kansas City get to C.J. Stroud? I think they're going to have some opportunities. The line for the Texans, C.J. Stroud's only been sacked 10 times. Now, 20 times. Granted, he's played in 9 games. So if you look at the last couple games since he's come back, that line has not really held up. Denver got to him. The Colts got to him. Maybe this is the game where Chris Jones does wreck it. But I think this is a really tall task. And if you want to say you got to give desperation mode to the Kansas City Chiefs, this is exactly where they want to be. So be it. I'm not buying into it. I thought Kansas City's season came to an end when they lost to the Denver Broncos. I just felt at that moment, you start to look at this dynasty, and that's after they lost to Buffalo. Yeah, they bounced back and they beat the Colts, and then they followed up by losing to the Dallas Cowboys. So they're going to have to run the table. They're going to have to run the table. That Broncos game, Broncos will have an opportunity to knock them out of playoff contention, but they should beat the Titans, the Raiders. Maybe they beat the Chargers. That's still, depending upon what happens against the Texans, that only gets them to 9 wins. So they got to jump a lot of teams. And even if they run the table and get to 11, there's no guarantee they're making the playoffs, which would be crazy. All right, fast approaching the 5 o'clock hour. 60 in the book, 60 to play with. As always, get social with me on X and IG at Rich Quinones. A lot of comments coming in. I want to get to them on X, on TikTok, also on the YouTube Shorts. Some Lane Kiffin comments, a little college football. We'll mix in a little more hot stove baseball. NBA, Giannis goes down last night. Maybe he knew something we didn't know, but keep it locked in as always. And we always like to thank our good sponsors. Get Ready with Tea, Three Brooks Bourbon. Fresh roasted coffee. That's in the show notes. Weather is starting to really get cold out there. So use that affiliate link. Save 20% off your first purchase of fresh roasted coffee. More NFL on the other side. I also have 4 or 5 scenarios I want to dive into with you guys this weekend regarding some of these marquee games. And I think the beauty of this weekend is a show me weekend, right? This is a show me weekend for some of these teams because when your backs are against the wall, 2 things happen. Wounded animal, what do? You back me in a corner, I'm going to come out fighting, or, I'm just kind of going to cower in the corner. And we're going to see which teams now that are wounded are going to fight and which teams are going to roll over. All right, 6 o'clock straight up. I'm sorry, 5 o'clock straight up. Quick timeout. We will come back on the other side, and we got to get to some of these comments. You guys are unbelievable. There are no punchable face comments thus far, but we'll see how it plays out. All right, we'll come back on the other side. All right, fast approaching the 5 o'clock hour on a Thursday edition of On Q. Rich Quinones here. Let's roll into some of these comments. Michael chimes in. Broncos country. Let's ride. Q, I'm ready for Kiffin time. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I was able to entertain you guys. What was it? A couple of days ago with the Kiffin conversation. Almost as bad as talking about this Deshaun Watson, which we were getting into yesterday for a moment. Let me read off some of the comments that were shared with me regarding Lane Kiffin, because I know for a fact you guys will laugh. All right, let's. As soon as I roll to it, I just start laughing at some of these comments. All right, what do we got here? Anyone else in this situation will say, I can't talk until after the playoffs. Rich, agree with you 100%. Bayou Brothers chimes in. Having signing day in the middle of the season is not fair to anyone, Q. Good point. Conroy says, change the rules in the calendar. Lane went for the better job. Get over it. This is the game. Don't blame him for playing it. Hunter chimes in, my goodness, what a bunch of friggin' crybaby Ole Miss fans. You're one of them? No, not really. PV says, or like a hostile takeover, school like Ole Miss breaks through, the rival school with bigger money just goes in, offers crazy money, and steals buys off the entire staff days before playoffs. No time to stabilize before playoffs. Bought off coach, takes playbook, and high fives off to new school with top staff. Calls up first round matchup and offers up the entire playbook. It's a pretty good point, as opposed to the ones that we're talking about the punchable face and, shut up, you don't know what the hell you're talking about when it comes to college football. Again, opinions vary. I like to think I know a little bit of what I'm talking about. I feel this way. When you're talking about these coaches, and no one's disputing if Lane Kiffin is not a good head coach or not, but you can't, shouldn't there be something to be said about not bailing? And it's something that Kosko and I talked about. Like, can you just kind of see it through? But yet, like your little buddy, when you're a kid growing up, you get a bike and then your buddy gets a bicycle a week later and you're not satisfied with the one you just want or with the one you just got. So now you want a new one. And for me, I don't know if I trust a guy like that. I don't know if I want to stick my kid in that situation, knowing that for 4 years, this guy might jump or this guy might turn around and go off to a better deal. And I thought Nick brought up a great point. He's the guy that's always striving for something more. Those types of people, I can appreciate that yearning, that want. But those types of people, especially in the world of sports, head coaches in college and universities, they can't be trusted because they're always looking for a better deal. They're always looking for something better. And it's very hard to compete with that. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And I'm telling you right now, if you send a kid to a school and all of a sudden, a year in, 2 years in, the coach that sat in your living room and he wasn't pitching the kid, he's pitching you and your wife, you and your husband, mom and dad. And I'm selling you on this idea that your kid's going to play, have fun, and more importantly, get an education. I'm going to look after him. And then a year or two, I bolt. That's a bad look. That is a bad look. And I get it. It's the way of the world. You're at a job, you're making X amount of dollars, you don't feel like you're being appreciated. Somebody else comes along and says, we're going to give you another 15, 20,000 a year. No one's going to be on your ass. No one's going to micromanage you. By the way, you can work from the house. You can be close to your family. You're going to grab it. You're going to at least consider it. And the problem is these head coaches make a significant amount of money and they have a lot of pull because it is all about the universities, the boosters, the alumni. They are the ones that are making. Everyone thinks, who's making the decision? It's really the athletic department to hire the head coach. No, it's not. It's the guys cutting checks, the donors, the boosters, the alumni to support the university. They're the ones that are basically saying, hire this guy or get rid of this guy. The athletic department and the AD, it's just, they're a placeholder. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to athletic directors because I know a lot of them. But from my experience, these major colleges, we know who makes the decision. We know who makes the decision. And when you jump like that, it reflects poorly on you and your character. And I'm not going to blame LSU. I'm not going to blame Ole Miss, but I do believe that Lane Kiffin could have handled it a lot differently. And the fact that, and I should have asked Kosko this, you're going to give an ultimatum to your current coaching staff. You guys going to turn around and boom, 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 right? Not get that money, Kiffin. Q, if the Giants called and said, we need a play-by-play announcer, would you leave the overseas B-ball? No, I wouldn't have to. But that's apples and oranges. That's apples and oranges. And that's a very good question you asked. Now, the B ball is during the week. So would I be lack of sleep doing the Giant games on a Sunday? I would deal with it. I know exactly what you're saying, and it's a fair question, probably an astute question. I'm actually surprised you came up and you brought something to the table. It goes to Luca Brasi. I understand it's all about money. I've worked at radio stations where I was offered other spots. I was offered other opportunities at other stations. I guess my problem is I'm loyal to a fault, but I know the way of the world and how it works. Now, if you're being pushed out and you see the handwriting on the wall, that's a different story. And I've been in that situation as well. Then you have to do what's best for you. But see it through is my question. See it through. And Lane Kiffin just decided, I'm going to take my playbook and I'm leaving. And he bolted. This late in the season, it's just a bad look. It's the optics are bad. The optics are bad. And to your point with that question, you know, kind of apples and oranges, because people know if you're under contract, you got to see it through. And then we'll make the decision after if we want to give you that gig. Because I've been locked in, I've been under contract with certain networks in the past, and it's also understood, and the devil's in the details. I get it in writing. If I commit to you, there's non exclusivity. I can do what I'm going to do on the side, but you will get a full commitment to that particular sport and or brand for the season, if that makes sense. You don't want to be a mercenary. You don't. And college sports, coaching, content creation, sports talk host, broadcaster, yeah, to some extent, we are mercenaries. We are. That's why I've always said it's different what I do and what some of you guys do. Because ultimately, I learned many years ago, I don't want to work for anyone. It's just not my personality. I don't want to be micromanaged. I don't like to be told what to do. I understand everyone has someone to answer to, but I also saw the changing landscape in media and radio and content. So what do? You pivot, you pivot, you pivot. It's one of the reasons that, to peel back the curtain a little bit and be fully transparent, I know with the fight game, I love calling the fights. I love calling boxing. I enjoy calling MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, but I love calling the fights. But I also understand in the States, there's not a lot of spots for a guy like me on top networks. They got guys that are, Hall of Fame worthy broadcasters. And I understand that. So I do a lot of the local cards up and down the East Coast, maybe float a little bit to the Carolinas, to Florida. I kind of pick and choose, the best spot for me doing some of these gigs. And if the work's consistent, that means everything. But with the basketball, it's probably one of the smart things to do, right? To pivot. But some of these jobs, they want to hire kids who are very green out of college and pay them nothing. You've been doing this like I have for over 20 plus years, and I've done a lot of leagues and I've relocated and I work for a lot of stations. I bring myself to the point where no, if you don't match me, if you don't meet me here, we're not even going to have the conversation. Um, Head coaches in sports, I'm not making millions of dollars. I wish I was. Then you start to have a little bit of the FU money. You can tell people where to go. What, go scratch. It's different. If I'm walking into a radio station or a platform and I'm selling myself and I'm committed and I sign a contract, I'm not going to bolt a month before that contract ends. I'm not going to do that. That's burning a bridge. So my whole point with Lane Kiffin is no matter what was presented to him, see it through. That's all. Just see it through. That's all. Merle Reese's retires and taps you on the shoulder. Take over. Would you take the job? As Eagles play-by-play voice, I don't think Merle's ever going to retire. Remember, I've told you this. You never want to be the guy who replaces the legend. You want to be the guy after the guy who replaces the legend. That's Father told me that years ago. I mean, this is that. You think you're going to replace a guy like Merle Reese, or Lampley, or Buck, or Jim Nance, who I think is one of the all-time greats. You want to be the guy who replaces the guy that replaced him. Let that guy get hammered, trying to duplicate or have half their success. I mean, my goodness, you're talking about the Mount Rushmores. I mean, um, you know, Merle had his station back in the day. Well, I think he still has it. I'll never forget. It was, I think it was 1490 WBCB. 1490 WBCB. It was, I don't know where the hell, I think it was out of Bucks County. And I kept, I mean, this is probably, I would say right after I came back doing radio in Ohio, or before I left. So after college, and then I was basically working for free in radio because that's what you do. But I remember I kept calling up the station. It was like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And the guy's like, I got nothing for you. I was like, I don't care. He goes, I got nothing for you. I was like, yeah, but you know what? Merle Reese is a great play-by-play guy. I can learn. And he's like, all right, whatever. So I interned, which, I'm losing money left and right driving up there to the mountains and, cleaning up, cleaning the production board, taking trash out, vacuuming the rug, stacking newspapers. And I'll never forget, I had a giant sweatshirt on. And the guy goes up to me. He's like, hey man, good job today. I said, thanks. He's like, yeah, just for future advice, I wouldn't come in here with the giant sweatshirt, and I'm like, whatever, have a little fun. I didn't say anything. And like, probably an hour later, I'm like cutting up tape. And Merle Reese comes in the studio and he introduces himself and he's like, pleasure to meet you, I'm Merle Reese, and I shook his hand, and, big fan, admire you. And he's like, would you mind giving me a second to record this? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, and also do me a favor. Don't ever wear that Giants gear in here again. I swear to God. I swear to God, that is a true story. And I just kind of chuckled and I said, I understood, not a problem. And he's like, thank you. And would you shut the door behind you? And I was like, okay. Oh my goodness. Uh, it was very funny. It was very funny. Speaking of pivot, Giants better pivot from Joe Shane. So how about this, Chino? So I was looking at Shane's draft picks, and we know they're kind of hit or miss. For me, I'm over Joe Shane. I'm over Joe Shane. But I'm going to ask you, as a diehard Giants fan, and Kevin, I know you're going to chime in. Matt, Greg, I know you guys are going to chime in. Giant fans that tune in religiously, even some of the guys in Florida. Are you tagging Joe Shane with the overall record of the team? And if you are, which I believe you should because he assembled the roster, are you also taking in consideration, now follow me, are you also taking in consideration that the Burns signing is huge, right? I mean, think about it. He's got 13 sacks. He's a big time player. He looks like an all pro. And the fact that they drafted Jackson Dart. Does that make up for anything, 11 total wins in 3, 4, 5 years under this regime? Deontay Banks, that's a bust of a draft pick. The kid's talented, but Wink Martindale wanted that kid because they thought we can build and mold this kid into a great DB. It has not worked out. There have been hits. Daniil hit, miss. Jalen Hyatt, miss. Thibodeau, the verdict's still a little out. Is it not? But Jackson Dart, you got to like that. Malik Neighbors, you got to like that. Robinson, you got to like that. I'm not giving him a pass. I'm not giving him a pass. I'm just asking you when push comes to shove. That's all. I'm just asking you. All right, 5-10 quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side. We'll reset the table as well. Keep it locked in. All right, welcome back. What do we got here? 512. I did answer the question. I did. I answered the Philadelphia Eagles question. I did. I did. I did. I most certainly did. I said you never want to be a guy that replaces a legend, right? I think I said that. I'm pretty positive I did. Um, Listen, doing play by play in the National Football League, are you kidding me? Doing network stuff? That's that would be a surreal opportunity. Now, I don't know if Eagles fans would want a diehard Giants fan to call their games, but I would be very objective. Even when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the last two times they won, I think I was very fair to the Philadelphia Eagles. I have so a lot of you guys are hitting me up. Let me explain this to you. I don't listen to Philly radio. Never have, never will. So a lot of you guys on X, you're hitting me up with this Jalen Hurts stuff, and one of the stations in Philadelphia, you know, equating him to Ben Simmons, and doesn't talk to. I have no idea, no idea. I have no idea, what the conversation is or isn't regarding that, right? Um, and I don't care, to be quite honest with you. I just don't care. If you're foolish enough to think or say that Jalen Hurts is not a good quarterback, then that's on you. And I don't care if Jalen Hurts sits with receivers or not. I don't know what some of these talking heads are looking for. I don't. I really don't. I'm not going to equate Jalen Hurts to Ben Simmons. That's absolutely clownish and asinine. You're talking about a guy that's won a championship, a Super Bowl MVP. I'm not really sure what people are looking for with some of these quarterbacks. I'm not really sure what some of these um, fan bases are looking for when we're talking about if you have a franchise quarterback at the end of the day. Because I believe he's a franchise quarterback. I just think at times he's very hit or miss and sporadic. Now, I've seen worse and I've seen better, but I've also seen very good Jalen Hurts. I've seen bad Jalen Hurts. Listen, they need to figure out what they're going to do offensively. And, Nick and Wallingford said, hey, what did you think about Nick Foles suggesting that they bring back Frank Reich? I think that's a great idea. But guess what? You're not bringing in Frank Reich to consult. You're not doing that. You're not bringing him in to consult and help out Kevin Patullo, because at the end of the day, you already know Frank Reich can do the job. Kevin Patullo's fan is going to be out in the street. So you got to be careful with that. But you guys want to know, okay, what's the solution to fix this offense? I can't tell you because it's broken. You got to take every play, one play at a time, every possession, one possession at a time, one series at a time. And you got to figure out, win a game on Monday night. Get to a quarterback that's already banged up. And the Chargers need that game just as bad as the Eagles need that game. The Chargers need that game to keep pace in the AFC West. The Eagles need that game and get their offensive going just for their mindset. Just for their mindset, they need that game. They have to be able to get themselves in a better mental space. Schoen is definitely accountable for the wins and losses. His trade for Burns and drafting Dart isn't enough to save him from the lackluster talent of the team. Burns' career only produced 2 wins. Yep. I mean, listen, I think it's a very good point that you bring up, and I think it's a fair and valid point. I'm ready to dismiss Joe Shane. I can't, I also say guys will argue with me. Well, it's not the GM's job to make plays. That's the player's job. Okay, but the GM drafted the players and the head coach has to coach them up. And the fact that my biggest issue My biggest issue with the debacle that is the New York Giants is the lack of accountability. And we talked about this the other day. It's apples and oranges. You're going to tell me or compare Abdul Carter, who won at Phil Simms' number, who won at Lawrence Taylor's number. You're going to compare him because he's missed some, walkthroughs, and he's hasn't been engaged, and he's been late. Whatever the issues are, right? He's a kid that hasn't gotten it just yet. And as a rookie, if he continues down this path, to me, it's a borderline bust of a draft pick. And honestly, I would trade his ass. I really would. Let someone else deal with the problem. But don't sit there and say, well, Parcells turned a blind eye to Lawrence Taylor. Are you really comparing the two? A kid that hasn't even stepped out on the field to a linebacker, a generational defensive talent, a Hall of Famer who's arguably the best defensive player the NFL has ever seen, who transcended the sport, who Joe Gibbs had to decide, I got to get a tight end to chip and block this guy because he's beating my tackles left and right? That's absolutely absurd. I can't even believe we're having this conversation. So, yeah, 86 Defensive Player of the Year, win the championship, Hall of Famer, win another one a couple years later. Yeah, I'm going to make concessions for Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, I'm going to do that because on a Sunday, he's going to produce. This kid can't even get out on the field. 18 past 5 o'clock hour. Ooh, by the way, how about this little nugget? We're dropping it. My guy, the incredible Shrinking Hermano, reposted our stream from Coastal Sports Digital Network, which is now part of the Odyssey family. So if you download the Odyssey app and you search Coastal Sports Digital Network and you hit play Monday to Friday, you will hear On Cue. Very happy to be part of Odyssey and, of course, Coastal Sports Digital Network. And yes, don't forget about the other programming the network has as well. Michael says, rat radio. Yeah. You're talking about Philadelphia? I guess. I mean, I can't listen to, I can't. I don't do like the jackass poll questions. Is Jalen Hurts good? Can you imagine being in a market, a major market, right? Doing a morning show or a drive time show, and your team wins a Super Bowl, and then you come on the air after your quarterback's been an MVP, and you question the validity of that MVP. You question the validity of that quarterback. I mean, take the mic away. It's almost as bad as years ago when I was working for a station in our backyard. Those that are in the Jersey Shore know exactly the station I'm talking about. And I had a absolute just goofball clown jackass of a producer. And I'll never forget the two things he said over my tenure there that will always stand out. He said, quote, I don't know about this Patrick Mahomes guy. That was number one. The second was Otani's just a sideshow. New headphones, who this? He 12 man, aka Heisman, aka Steeler Nation, aka Duval, aka Vince chiming in. Sup, people working but still locked in. My man, pots and pans. You better be locked in. That's what we do 4 to 6, Monday to Friday on Q. I posted a short on Deshaun Watson because my gut, I feel as though Deshaun Watson is going to be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in 2026. Oh, my goodness. Jonathan chimes in. Q, you are not even a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. You don't work in the Pittsburgh market, but you nailed Mike Tomlin. What has this guy done that's so different? What the hell has he done? And what have we seen over the last 9 years? Listen, remember now, 2, 3 years ago, I said Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat. 2 years ago, Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat. Last season, Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat. Going into this season, here you go. We're going to make concessions. We're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. We're going to let Justin Fields walk. I get it. He's benched now with the Jets. We're going to go and make a move for Metcalf. And as I mentioned, you have your wide receiver who has not played like an all-pro wide receiver. You have your quarterback who has not played like the quarterback you think you were going to get because he's not that guy anymore. And you're calling out players left and right. If the Pittsburgh Steelers do not make the playoffs, if the Pittsburgh Steelers do not finish the season with 9 wins, I think Mike Tomlin gets fired. I think the handwriting's on the wall. The buzz is very great. This is a team that's 6-6. So I'm asking the Steelers right now to get to 9 wins, which means you have to beat the Ravens, which I don't see happening. You have to beat the Dolphins, which I don't see happening. You have to beat the Lions, which I don't see happening. You have to go and play the Browns on the road, and by that time, that might be mentally checked out. Now, here I'm going to paint a picture scenario for the Steeler Nations fans that chime in and absolutely destroy me every other day, especially when I talk about, Tomlin and Steeler Nation. What if this team goes into such a slide right now and they lose, what are they, 6-6? So they got 5 games coming up. What if they lose 7 straight to close out the season? 8 of 9. 7 straight, 8 of 9. You think Mike Tomlin is going to survive that? Imagine if they go out on the road against Baltimore and these receivers are running bad routes and dropping balls, and Aaron Rodgers is being laid out on his fanny, and he has another one of those bad 10 of 23, a buck 13, and a pick type of game. You know for a fact the you-know-what is going to hit the fan. You know as much as I do. Vince says, don't think just because I'm working, I'm going to take you trolling me. Watson being activated was not a football decision. It was medical, and they couldn't stop it. Oh, it's a football decision. Oh, it is a football decision. I don't know why you are so concerned with the Cleveland Browns. New headphone, who dis? I don't know why you have such stock and equity in the Cleveland Browns. Key 12 man, a.k.a. Heisman. I don't know why you're so enamored with their quarterbacking position when you've got a squad. You've got Jacksonville. You've got the long flowing locks of Trevor Lawrence slinging it back there. You're on the cusp, Vince, of winning an AFC South division title. You're right there. And you're focused and concerned with a quarterback that's been, inconsistent, hurt, in trouble off the field. But every cent of his contract is guaranteed. That is why I think he will be the starter. You have to get some type of a return on your investment if you're the Cleveland Browns. Do you not? In what world do you give someone 300 and something odd million dollars and say, don't even show up on Monday? You have so much. You gave up so much. I'm telling you right now, read the tea leaves, man. Read the room. Read the room. There's a reason. There's a reason, and this is why he's going to practice and the practice window. And I'm not suggesting he's going to play this season. And I can see the Cleveland Browns drafting a quarterback, but Deshaun Watson will be on the roster even if they draft a quarterback because of the money. It's a guaranteed contract. So you sit there. Cleveland right now is number 5. Check out my favorite site, Tankathon. Tennessee might draft a quarterback, which is crazy. The Giants aren't. The Saints should. Vegas should. And then Cleveland should. You might get 4 quarterbacks going the first 5 picks if it held the form. So you're ramping up Watson slowly. You open up that 20-day practice window. And look, 2025, we know it's a long shot, but again, the contract locks him in through at least 2026. That is my point. So you are going to get a crowded backfield. You're going to have a crowded quarterback room. What was the conversation in August? There's no way they're going to keep 4 quarterbacks on the roster. They did. They did. Listen, I don't think he's going to see game action. I don't. But you have to think about this from a financial standpoint. Do you really believe the Cleveland Browns want to take a heavy dead cap hit of more than 80 million? I mean, I don't think it's possible, which tells me he's more likely to be on the roster, which tells you that you got a big time quarterback room with a lot of quarterbacks or a crowded quarterback room. I mean, I'll tell you, once the season ends and the odds come out for the Cleveland Browns win total, grab the under right away. Don't even wait. It's a 5-year, $230 million fully contract. I mean, that's just absurd. Absurd. All right, I mentioned some of these games tonight. Gave you a little thought. Well, I should say Thursday night, Dallas Cowboys. And just a reminder, 5:30 on a Thursday edition of On Q, powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. 20% off first purchase. A new episode of Back Your Play is dropping tomorrow. You can catch that every Saturday and Sunday, 11 to 12 on NY48 WWON. And as we mentioned, we are pumped and excited. Back with Coastal Sports Digital Network, SR 1029 FM The Game. Download the Odyssey app, and all you need to do is search Coastal Sports Digital Network and hit the play button. So you'll get all the shows. You'll get Pete during the day. When Angel comes back, Martinez and Company. You got Duncan Dad Show. You got Jonathan Marshall on the Marshall Time Podcast. You got me Monday to Friday on Q. So there's other shows that are going to be dropping in 2026. So definitely very easy to do. Also follow them on social media as well. We'll go through week 14 as we typically do, a little sneak peek, a little peekaboo with these games. Tonight, Dallas and the Lions starts us off Thursday Night Football. The total is still sitting at 56.5, but we'll sprinkle through the Sunday slate. A little more Eagles talk, a little more NFC East talk. Got a lot of comments coming in on Jalen Carter, Jalen Hurts, Joe Shane. We got some comments on some Miami Dolphins fans tuning in right now in Miami. Also in Clearwater, they want to get into Tua's contract, what I think his future is with the Miami Dolphins. We got some head coaches that, as I said, this is it. This is your last run for some of these guys. It is certainly the next several weeks in the NFL, make or break. And the sad and reality of the NFL at this point, you're going to look around Tennessee, the Giants, the Saints, the Raiders, Cleveland, even Washington, the Jets. Some of these guys, they're mentally checked out. This is kind of the portion of the show where you get into the business decisions. And you see it where players are just not going hard. They're not tackling. They're like, all right, I'm looking at something else. You know, we got to get packing. We're more interested in what's going on with our holiday trip coming up. So it's something to watch. And even from a betting and gambling standpoint, that can be a little dicey proposition. So we'll dive into that a little more as well. Bottom of the hour, we'll take you up to 6 o'clock straight up. Quick timeout, 30 to play with. All right, welcome back, everyone. 5:30 on a Thursday edition of On Q. I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We always appreciate you guys keeping us locked in. Good eyeballs today on this Thursday. Get social with me at Rich Q on Q, X and IG, TikTok, Rich Q on the mic. You can like, comment, subscribe to my channel as well. And as we mentioned too, Download the Coastal Sports Digital Network. I should say download the Odyssey app, search Coastal Sports Digital Network, and you can catch the show Monday to Friday, 4 to 6. Happy to be part of Coastal Sports Digital Network and, of course, the Odyssey family going forward. We're also brought to you by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. 20% off your first purchase, BYP20. I got my cafe con leche right here in front of me, sipping it through the past 2 hours. All right, let's get to some of these games, get your initial thoughts as we kind of go through. And we'll look at the lines as well. Let me squeeze in a couple of these comments on Facebook and X. Mario on Summers Point chimes in. Q, what do you have for the top 10 again? I heard the first 4 or 5. Can you round it out? If you're talking about the NFL, absolutely. Cleveland would be right now as it stands number 5. So Tennessee, obviously, they would get the top pick. Now, if Tennessee figures out a way to win 2 games and the Giants sit at 2 wins and finish 2-15, the Giants will get the top overall pick, which would be crazy because there's no chance in hell. And I know Chino's listening right now. I want Joe Shane making that pick, but I would actually trade that pick for assets. The Giants you might consider that. The Saints are number 3. The Raiders are bad football teams. The Raiders are number 3. The Browns sit at 5. Washington, who made it all the way to the NFC Championship last season, 3-9 right now, they would pick 6. The Jets at 7. Arizona 8. Atlanta via the trade with the Rams 9. And Cincinnati would sit with the 10th overall pick. Interesting, too, Minnesota can find a way and creep into the top 10. I'm wondering if they also would be eyeing up a quarterback, which almost takes us to the conversation we had a couple weeks ago about talent evaluation in the NFL when it comes to the quarterbacking position, because either these guys are just misjudging talent left and right, they don't have a read on the quarterback, they're overvaluating the quarterback, or these GMs are reaching when it comes to the quarterback position. Seattle and the Falcons. Seattle's laying 7, totals 44.5. The Falcons, I expect a no-show. I really do. Darnold has really put together a really nice season. I know half of you guys right now are cringing. You guys are cringing right now when I say that. I'm going to just put it in perspective for you. Darnold's not going to have 30-something odd touchdowns like he did last year. But Darnold's going to throw for over 3,500 yards. He's probably going to have about 27, 28 touchdowns. He's got 5 games left. Let's say he averages, a touchdown, maybe 2. He's right under 30. So he's put together back-to-back really good seasons. I know where you guys are going with this. Show me. Playoffs. Everyone remembers what happened last season late for my guy, Slinging Sammy Darnold. I mean, he played really good football, and he came in hot to close out the season on the road against Detroit. He threw for almost 400 yards in a win against Green Bay. But all you guys want to keep throwing in my face is they got waxed by the Lions 31-9, and he threw for a $166. And then you guys follow that up with, well, he didn't do much against the Rams, and he threw a pick and got sacked 9 times. The Rams defense was lights out. Different story this year for Seattle. But I like Seattle in this game. I think Atlanta is pretty much going to make those business decisions. Cincinnati and the Bills. Bills laying 5.5 must win for the Buffalo Bills. The Titans and the Browns. We talked a little bit about this game for a couple of reasons. Sanders, Cam Ward, here we go. So you're going to get the top overall draft pick against a quarterback that many thought was going to be a top 5 draft pick. But the reason to watch this game is Myles Garrett. A couple sacks away from breaking Michael Strahan's regular season sack record. Cam Ward takes a lot of sacks. If you're going to play anything in this game, look for the over when it comes to Myles Garrett and sacks. 2 very disappointing teams, the Commanders against the Vikings. The Vikings are laying 1.5 at home. McCarthy's coming back. I don't think it really matters at this point. I'm hearing some rumblings now that Minnesota, a lot of the fan base, they're looking at Kevin O'Connell and they're saying, well, wait a second. You were supposed to be a quarterback whisperer. Now, I'm not going to suggest he's on the hot seat because they had issues and they had to deal with some injuries, but it's something worth monitoring as the season goes on. I think he's a good coordinator, 100%. Chino chimes in. Giants definitely need to trade back if they are in the top 3 in the draft. I would agree. I would agree. There's needs there, but they also have some young talent. You get Neighbors and Scadaboo back, and Robinson has put together a monster season. And think about this: Wanda Robinson's played with 3 quarterbacks this year. Russ Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart. Dolphins and the Jets. Oh, I wanted to get to. So Jose in Miami chimes in. Q. I wanted to talk a little bit about Tua's contract. Do you think it's such an albatross that Miami will try to get out of it? So Miami's in a very precarious position. Miami started the season 0-3, and we were all talking about, myself included, Mike McDaniel might not last the season. They beat a bad Jets team, and then they lost 3 straight to sit at 1-6. But now they won 4 out of their last 5, including a win over Buffalo. Now, they had the ugly win against Washington. They had a nice win against a bad Saints team. A win is a win in the NFL. They've got the Jets. That's a beatable opponent. If Miami beats the Jets, I believe they can beat the Steelers. I believe they can beat Cincinnati. Baker Mayfield's banged up, and then you got the Patriots. What if Miami goes on a little heater and they win 8 games, 9 games? Mike McDaniel's not going anywhere. And what if Tua plays well? Then I think Tua salvaged this season, and he also has shown them, well, listen, you let me get through the season. You keep me upright, right? You keep me upright. I'm going to make some plays. Let's run it back one more season. Because if you're going to bring McDaniel back, you're probably not getting rid of the quarterback, if that makes sense. That's just, Tua at this stage of his career shouldn't be talking about working on fundamentals. So the next 4 or 5 games are going to speak very highly of Tua going forward. And I think it's going to be very telling if they want to keep Tua going forward. He's got to play better. We know that. He knows that. And if McDaniel wins a couple more games, Ross loves him. Then they're going to sit there and say, well, he's bought a little time. We're going to run it back. So Miami is a very interesting team. Just kind of keep an eye on them as the season winds down. Saints are a bad team. They need to make wholesale changes. They don't have a quarterback. I think it's been a down year for Tampa Bay. They've been very inconsistent. They really have. They started the season off 3-0, lost the game against the Eagles, could have won that game, came back. They were sitting at 5-1. Now they've hit a little bit of a adversity. They come back, gut check win against Arizona with a banged up Baker. Here's the silver lining with Tampa Bay. They're 7-5 right now, but they've got the Saints to Falcons coming up. You get to 9, now you got to just figure out a way to split with the Panthers and get to 10. I'm not going to suggest that wins you the division because the Panthers are right there. Could be enough for a playoff spot. I mean, it's such a crowded, is it not crowded NFC this year. Monday Marcus chimes in from Wilmington, Delaware. Q, how do you think the impact of Carter is going to, how do you think the loss of Carter is going to impact the Eagles defense come Monday night? It's a big loss. Now, have they been able to get to the quarterback consistently? No. But it's a big loss. I did see that Darius Slay is not reporting to the Bills, which, you almost kind of get this, all right, maybe I'll mull retirement, slip through the cracks. I mean, think about it. The Bills didn't list him on the injury report after he did not report for a physical. He wasn't on the league's transaction wire, so he remains on the roster. So for those that think the Eagles can swoop in, hold on a second. Again, you're talking about claiming him off waivers, so they already made corresponding moves. If he doesn't play for Buffalo, then now you pretty much lose a little bit of depth in your secondary. And you're talking about the final month of the regular season where they can ill afford to lose any type of depth. So I just wanted to get that out there. As far as Jalen Carter, it's a loss. Jalen Carter is a good football player. He's a good football player. But this is where you have to give, um, you know, next man up. It's got to be there, right? And I know that, you avoid surgery in that regard, which is good. And it could have been worse because if you have surgery on both shoulders, you're pretty much done. You're done. I'm heading to the IR. I'm heading to injury reserve. I'm going to miss 4 games, maybe even longer. Never a good thing. I know Dr. Cho on X always talks about these injuries. So the Eagles will probably keep him off the IR. And then again, you sit out the regular season finale, get him back for the playoffs. But defensively, I think the Eagles will be able to, um, hang in there with the Chargers. Like, maybe for a quarter or two. Like, I'm starting to get worried right now that defensively, they have not put together a sustained pass rush. They haven't gotten from their edges. They haven't gotten it from their tackles. They really haven't. They just haven't. Like, there's not, when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles and you think of, okay, who's the guy that get to the quarterback the most? They really haven't done a good job of getting to the quarterback. They have 24 sacks this season. That's horrible. You think of an Eagles defense, these guys are right around 45, 50 at this stage of the game. So I think it impacts them greatly. I think if they allow Herbert to stay in the pocket, then they're going to have some opportunities, the Chargers are, to put up some points. I really do. All right, 5:42. Another quick timeout. We'll come back. 20 to play with. We'll take up to 6 o'clock straight up. All right, 5:45. We'll take up to 6. As I mentioned, Thursday edition of On Q. Busy Friday show, a What the Freak Football Friday edition of On Q coming up manana. John Bueller is going to join us in his weekly spot from Fanside at Lloyd Vance as well. And we'll run through the gamut. We'll get back to some of these comments. Chino says, I'm a Penn State fan. I know. Double whammy with the Lonely Giants. Have you heard the super agent Jimmy Sexton has PSU basically blacklisted on hiring a new coach? Also, Dave's a possibility. So I go back if you can, Chino, listen to the first 20 minutes or so of the show, which is on the YouTube channel. After we're done, you can download it. It's right there. Had Nick Kosko on from On3Sports. We actually talked about the head coaching vacancy with Penn State. I threw out Manny Diaz with Duke if they had a big win over Virginia as a dark horse. Now, Daboll's name has floated around, and my point was if you're Brian Daboll, that is a great landing on your feet spot. Um, I would be very careful though with I, there is so what you're talking about is I guess McShay mentioned something, right? That Sexton was kind of screwing around with the um, coaching staff, right? And I, I don't know exactly what McShay said, but if you think about it, you're talking about the agent who's been mostly associated with who? LSU's pursuit of Lane Kiffin. So now you're talking about a high profile job. You have another high profile job. So you got LSU, Florida, Virginia Tech, Auburn, Arkansas, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Stanford already have filled their vacancies. Penn State, to Chino's point, kind of sitting out there, with their what in the wind, thinking about their next head coach. They fire Jimmy Franklin in mid October. And you're like, hey, if we're going to do it, that gives us a 2-month head start. It's one of the reasons I wanted the Giants to fire Brian Daboll. You got a head start. So, according to McShay, it's not a coincidence that the Nittany Lions job remains open. I guess he mentioned this on a podcast, and I don't know which one, and I'm sure you guys probably tuned in, but just to kind of paraphrase, basically he's saying he's messing around with Penn State. Penn State let go of their guy, James Franklin, in a manner that he didn't appreciate, McShay said of Sexton. So now they're kind of sitting back, and every time they go and try our head coach or get serious with a coach, the coach who's represented by Sexton winds up with an extension or winds up going to maybe UCLA. So it's frustrating to me. So the irony is we had the same conversation with Kosko. And I guess in fairness, it seems curious that Penn State, which a lot of we would say appealing job in the NFL, the Giants, appealing job in college, Penn State, maybe the best job opening this offseason, and you still don't have a head coach. Now, again, keep going to Chino's point, whisper down the lane, Penn State was pursuing Chesney, who's also Jimmy Sexton's client. So now, all of a sudden, you got the former JMU head coach opts to not even talk to Penn State, takes the UCLA job. So what you're seeing right there is almost like a Rosenhaus, Rich Paul. That's the power of the agent right now. Now, when it's all said and done, as I mentioned in the 4 o'clock hour, the boosters, the alumni, the guys that cut the checks, they're going to really decide who's going to be the next head coach of Penn State. But for a guy like Brian Daboll to land on your feet, that's a hell of a spot. I just don't know if Penn State would go that route. I think Manny Diaz is a very live dark horse, but it's an appealing job. Don't get me wrong. It's Penn State. I've got my, I look at Penn State differently after everything transpired with Paterno and Sandusky. And I know, for years being on the radio down in this market, a lot of Penn State people used to listen to my show. A lot of Penn State people didn't appreciate my thoughts and opinions on that whole situation. I'll take it to my grave. Joe Paterno, if you spit on the street, on the side, he knew about it. He knew exactly what the hell was going on. But again, you let sleeping dogs lie. These kids have no ties to that. Obviously, the new head coach. It's a good landing spot, and it is an extremely appealing job to get the Penn State job. And, Franklin you got to look at the track record in big games. Whether it's college or the pros, you got to win. You got to win, right? You just got to win. Kevin chimes in, Q, would you take a flyer on a offensive guru with no head coaching experience or a guy like McCarthy? So Kevin's a Giants fan. So here's my thinking. The Giants need to go out and they need to basically get stabilized. And it might not be the sexiest name. If you're a Giant fan and I say to you next year, they're not going to win the playoffs, but they're going to win 7 or 8 games. And you're going to say, man, they're starting to show. This team's coming. In 2 years, they win 9, 10 games and get in the playoffs. In 3 years, they win the division and maybe get bounced in the playoffs in the first round. In year number 4, hey, man, they're putting it together. They're putting it together. They can come out of the NFC. Well, how do you do that? A lot of times you build a roster, the coaching staff, but the head coach, he's got to have a little equity already in the NFL bank. And McCarthy's not the sexiest name, but he will stabilize the franchise. And if you have talent, you're going to be good for 9, 10 wins. Would you sign up for 10, 11 wins? Would you sign up for 9 wins? Would you sign up for 8 wins? And you look at Jackson Dart in year number 2, throwing for 3,800 yards, 29 touchdowns, a couple picks, and he's sliding. He's not taking hits. I would sign up for that right now, December 4th. Are you kidding me? Where do I sign? So, to the texter's point, you need stability. You have to stabilize the ship. And there's a lot of franchises, there's a lot of NFL teams that have no idea how the hell to do that right now. Some of these franchises are in purgatory. Atlanta, New Orleans, Arizona, the contract they gave Kyler Murray. How about the Raiders? They thought bringing in Pete Carroll, an energetic Pete Carroll, a guy that won before, right? But his, shelf life ran out in Seattle. They thought it was a good idea to trade for Geno Smith. The Raiders are a bad football team, but they're a great historic franchise in the NFL. The NFL is better when the Giants are good, when the Raiders are good, right? When the Packers are good. When Cleveland's good, you're talking about historic franchises that have they've fallen on hard times. They really have. So we went through some of these games. I mentioned Saints and Tampa Bay, Colts and Jacksonville, Steelers and the Ravens. That's a game we'll dive into a lot more tomorrow. Bears and the Packers, we'll get into that as well. We'll run through the 4:00 games in a second. Final timeout. We'll come back on the other side. We'll take up to 6. All right, a couple minutes to play with. Don't forget, we're powered by our good friends over at Three Brooks Bourbon. Get ready with tea. Also, check us out on the Odyssey app. You can download the Odyssey app, search Coastal Sports Digital Network, Monday to Friday, on cue, back in the saddle with my guy, the incredible Shrinker Romano, Angel Martinez. So we are very happy to be part of SR 1029 going forward, foreseeable future. Also, you can always subscribe to the YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q and follow me on social media. Back Your Play will be dropped tomorrow with Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, Monday 8 to 9 on SR 1029. We'll run through all these games. And we'll close out with a couple of these 4:00 games. Denver and the Raiders, Bears and the Packers. That's a big game on Fox. I would imagine that'll be a Burkhardt and Brady game. And I'm wondering, I would suspect that, let me see. I'm looking at this CBS. Oh, Nance and Romo or Ian Eagle have to be on that. I would say Nance and Romo, Colts and Jags, or maybe Steelers and Ravens or Ian Eagle on one of those games. Either way, you're going to get Nance Romo and you'll get the Birdman on one of those games. 1:00 CBS. Fox window. Oh, it's got to be Bears and Packers. Yeah, that Fox window, Brady and Burkhardt, that'll be 4:25 window. The Rams and the Cardinals, that's 4:25. Then you got Sunday Night Football, the Texans and the Chiefs. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you are a Chiefs fan, man, this is it, brother. I mean, this is your last gasp. If you're Chiefs Kingdom, if you lose this game against the Texans, you're done. The dynasty has ended. You will have to regroup. And I know this game is in Kansas City. I understand that. But man, this Texans defense is really, really good. Real quick, Damon chimes in. Q, did you see that the Cavs are getting fined $250,000? I saw that. Violating player participation policy, they did not make Darius Garland available for a nationally televised game versus a non-national game. Load management, people. We've talked about it. All right, let me clean it up with a couple more games before we get out of here. And then you have the Eagles and the Chargers, Monday Night Football. Eagles are a 2.5-point favorite on the road against the Chargers. Chargers are 5-2 at home. The Birds are 4-2 on the road. So obviously, listen, this defense takes a hit without Jalen Carter. I mean, he's a run stopper. He's very disruptive. If you're the Chargers, you can kind of run now directly in the teeth of that Eagles front. And I think they're going to do that, especially knowing that Justin Herbert's banged up. Now, granted, it's not his throwing hand, but it could be a nagging, just a nuisance, right? But if I'm the Chargers, I got to run the football. Averaging 4.5 yards a carry this year. I got to run the football. That will open things up. You get McConkey, you get Allen, you get these guys in the slot, these hitch routes, get them in space. They're going to be able to do some damage. Herbert's the only one that's showing up on the injury report. Other than that, it's a clean slate when we're talking about the starters for the Chargers. And he had surgery, left non-throwing hand. It went well. He's day-to-day. Look, he's playing, right? That swelling is going to go down. You got enough time. You get the benefit, too, of having this game Monday night, so a lot of treatment, a lot of ice, a lot of rehab. He's a tough quarterback. He will be out there. Now, when you talk about the injuries, again, Eagles, they got some injuries. They got, look, Lane Johnson, it's a big loss. Lane Johnson right now showing up as questionable. And we know the record of the Eagles without him. I think it's 15-24. Carter's out. They've got some, you talk about their defense, their depth, they're banged up a little bit. They're banged up. Special teams, they got some issues. Gibson, he's questionable. You're talking about your punt returner, your kick returner. Some of these games come down to special teams at times. All right, going to start wrapping it up on a Thursday edition of On Q, powered by our wonderful friends at Three Brooks Bourbon. Played Again Sports, 2 locations, Deffern and Mount Laurel. Get ready with tea. And of course, our very, very, as I'd love to say, our very, very, very good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. 20% off your first purchase, BYP20. Excellent job with the comments. Appreciate you guys. Very happy to be back on Coastal Sports Digital Network, Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, part of the Odyssey family. So major, major opportunity for some exposure, and really grateful for the opportunity, and had a lot of fun today. You guys were unbelievable with all the comments. Busy Friday show. We will recap Dallas and Detroit. I'm telling you right now, I do like the Cowboys in a high-scoring game tonight. That offense is starting to click. I think the Lions, you're going to see another bugaboo by Dan Campbell in the fourth quarter, going for it or chasing points early on. Mark my words, as de facto likes to say, mark the tape. All right, fast approaching 6. We will be back in the saddle manana. Appreciate Nick Kosko tomorrow. Lloyd Vance in the 4 o'clock hour. John Bueller from Fanside in the 5 o'clock hour. You guys out there as well. Hashtag on Q. Don't forget, follow me on social media. Very easy to do. At Rich Q on Q on X and IG. TikTok Rich Q on the mic. This has been On Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Follow along on the YouTube channel. Coastal Sports Digital Network, Sports Radio 102.9 FM. Download the Odyssey app. We'll be back in the saddle manana on a Friday, a football Friday. What the Frig Friday edition of On Q. As always, enjoy your sports Thursday. Hasta luego, mi dia.